Welcome back with us for a really exciting webinar this afternoon. I want to thank Carlene also, who keeps these going, and I want to also welcome back Ethan. And he hates it when I talk about personal stuff, so I'll just tell you it's Ethan's birthday today, and since he doesn't want me to say too much, I'll just say it's a round number that starts with a 3. So big birthday for E. I want to thank New Hope Network, the Januzzi Group, Bank of America, and Whipstitch Capital for helping us to put on these panels and seminars. To remind you, we're in the midst of a month-long series of seminars, all stemming from the Hirshberg Entrepreneurship Institute mission of trying to basically help organic and natural entrepreneurs and enterprises grow. And our speaker today and our speakers throughout this series have generously given of their time, not only during this particular crisis, but over many years, to helping provide the kind of counsel that, frankly, and I'm sure Seth will agree with me, all of us wish we had had back in our day. Whether you have a finance issue, a marketing issue, a branding issue, a distribution issue, positioning, cash flow, we're just trying to be here to help grow your business. And so honored and delighted that so many people are joining. Tomorrow, we do have a very special session also. So many of you have said that getting through the distribution bottleneck, getting your product, assuming you can overcome your supply chains, getting it to the consumer is obviously your number one concern. And obviously for those who sell the food service, it's a big concern. For those of us who've been heavily dependent on retail, many of us are doing more and more with e-com. But I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on this call that UNFI is a particularly concerning partner. And believe me, when you hear John Raich tomorrow, you'll understand that they have their hands full as well. I will tell you that's at 4:30 Eastern time, John Raich, Bob Burke, and me. I will tell you that 1,200 people have signed up for tomorrow's seminar, which sort of indicates the popularity. So, and we have a 1,000-person limit to how many can sign on. So get on that one early tomorrow, please. On Thursday, Shazi Visram, from Happiest Family, and she'll talk about her new enterprise, will also be joining us. And frankly, Seth and I have had a long-running history with Shazi as well, so it's really family week here. A word before we turn to Seth about you. You saw the polling results. I too, like Julie, I'm really happy to see the numbers of you who are less worried than even a week or two ago. And we're all aware that there's the challenges on both ends, like I say, supply and sales bottlenecks. But mainly, I take this as a sign of very good health in our sector, and good health in your own business. And our mission today, like with this whole month, is to remind all of us that challenges happen. Merit happens. And my friend and colleague and guest who will now speak is somebody who has had a lot of merit happen. I'll just say, I could go on and on about Seth. I was on his board rather forever, but I remember this young kid. I know he looks pretty young still, but he was younger. He was the definition of persistence. And I remember at an Expo East in Washington, Seth riding an escalator up as I was riding down, and he was still at Calvert Social, and he was damned if I was going to get away. And he just kept talking to me the whole way on this escalator, and he was even stepping backwards as I was going down. He came around and got down the other end. Anyways, he had me at go. It was that kind of thing. And we've had our families have had a wonderful long run together. My salary for my years of service on the Honest Tea Board were pallets of Honest Tea that were delivered to our lake house, and poor Ethan knows them well because he and his buddies were all recruited to load one at a time, pallet after pallet after pallet, case after case of honest tea that kept us all sustained and turned Ethan into the handsome young 30-year-old that he is. So,
it was worth every minute.
Indeed, indeed. So without further ado, Seth, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys. And happy birthday, Ethan. And thank you, Gary. It really does feel like a family homecoming. And I echo everything you said. There really is, you and Meg and the whole family have been not just investors, but supporters and guides, not just in business, but in life as we tried to navigate through everything. And we've certainly been through a lot of challenges together. So it's wonderful to share today some of the lessons, some of the things I've learned, and some insights. Especially I want to focus on crises because while it's not a popular topic, I think it's something we can all relate to, especially now. And so I thought I would tell the story of some of the things I've been through, actually through the lens of crises. And so I'll start with, before I launched any of these businesses, right after college, I spent a year in China. And so I'm still in touch with some of my Chinese students. And as I was reading all the news about the coronavirus, I reached out to one of my students just to confirm I had the right recollection of the Chinese word for crisis is the word wei ji. And there are two characters, wei, which means danger, and ji, which means opportunity. And if you think about it, certainly a crisis embodies both of those. There is real danger. There's a health danger. There's an economic danger, certainly a livelihood, business viability danger, but there is opportunity as well. And so I think by definition, all entrepreneurs are optimists. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't believe that a better thing could be possible. And so I think it's our job to find the opportunity. And I don't mean, you know, how do you sell Purell for $10 a bottle? I mean, how do you find a better way, a different way to make things happen? And so I'll share with you just a few of the crises that I've been through. And it's especially poignant for me, actually, because literally almost to the day, 22 years ago, I was in my kitchen in Bethesda, Maryland, with my co-founder, Barry, who was my professor from Yale. And we were brewing up samples of tea for our first meeting with Whole Foods in the mid-Atlantic, Rockville, Maryland, 17 stores that we had managed to get an appointment with. And so we're brewing the tea, and the kitchen has got teapots and beakers and thermoses, and it's just a mess. And my wife walks in with our middle son, Ellie, who was at the time 4 years old. And my wife, Julie, had this just ashen look on her face. So something that clearly was, you know, she was not happy, to say the least. And I said, oh gosh, you know, look, we'll clean up the kitchen. It'll, you know, look great when we're done. And she said, that's not what I'm worried about. And I need to speak to you. She took me to the other room and she said, Ellie, who just had been at his 4-year-old checkup, had gone to a follow-up appointment with a cardiologist. And it turns out his aorta was closed off to the point where he was going to need really aggressive, invasive surgery within a matter of weeks. So just to keep in mind, I had just recently left my job at Calvert in the investment world. I was, you know, had cut off sort of my, all the sort of economic stable stuff and was venturing out. And so here I am. What am I doing? You know, I've just sort of put my family out to sea. And now we have this major crisis we have to go through. And looking back, you know, if Ellie had gone for his appointment a few weeks earlier, maybe I wouldn't have left Calvert. Maybe I would have said, you know, I need a stable job and be able to provide for my family. But life is what happens when you're making other plans. So so we went I didn't get much sleep that night, but the next day I got in front of the Whole Foods buyer and to their my great appreciation and their, you know, long-term partnership, they placed an order for 15,000 bottles after I had, you know, sold them the product I had made in my thermoses and had an empty Snapple bottle that I pasted a label on. And I will say that that was only one of probably now thousands of times when I had to compartmentalize. I had to sort of put all of my worries about Ellie in one part of my brain, and I had to focus on convincing Whole Foods that this was going to be something worth trying. And so we got the order for 15,000 bottles, and then literally within a matter of days, we checked Ellie into Children's Hospital in DC. And for the next 2 weeks, I was, sleeping in the, either in the cot next to him, or would go down to the lobby and at midnight meet a friend who was working on formulations, and just had to find a way. And so, there was a point where, what am I committed to? Am I, like, I think with every crisis, you have to make a choice. And am I saying this is a business or it's a family? And the choice I made was it's both, and I'm not going to sacrifice either one. And so I think for me, the decision to invest in family was the choice I made. And I'm happy to say, not just that I'm still married to the same woman I was 22 years ago, but Ellie is now actually still living at our house. He's now 26 years old, teaching in Washington, D.C. at a charter school, and just ran 10 miles in a pace that I would have envied running, but wonderful to feel that those investments paid off. So Honest Tea got into Whole Foods. We started in the natural channel, like so many other businesses in this field. And we grew, and we became pretty quickly the fastest growing tea. And we took our success from those 17 Whole Foods stores to grow into other Whole Foods stores. And around 2003, we just achieved national distribution through Whole Foods, which was great, and into the whole natural foods channel. But at that time in 2003, we really ran into another major crisis. At the time, all of our products were packaged in glass bottles, and we got a delivery of glass bottles from our supplier that had a lot of bubble. And so we rejected several lots, but even the lots we didn't reject still had bubbles in them. And so as a result, there was a lot of broken glass on the floor, because what we do is we fill our tea, we pasteurize it, so we're boiling to 190 degrees, and if there's any faults in the bottle, they'll break. And so we kept having to stop the line, and we ended up producing probably about a third of what we had hoped to produce, because we just had to throw out so much. But even with those precautions, we got reports. First, we got one report of a bottle in Whole Foods that had a piece of broken glass in it. And so we got rid of that lot. We recalled that entire lot. This is in 2003. We're doing about $4.5 million in sales. So, enough to be a business, but not enough to be, pulling, to afford to be able to pull product off the shelf. And so we thought we had addressed everything once we pulled that lot off the shelf. But then there was another piece of broken glass that showed up in a different Whole Foods in a different part of the country. And Whole Foods has a policy, 3 strikes and you're out. We were, one little piece of glass away from getting kicked out of Whole Foods. And so we said we can't afford that risk, not only for our business, but obviously for the safety of our consumer. And so we pulled everything we made off the shelves. And so, the job of what most entrepreneurs and sales team want to do is sell. The last thing they want to do is, pull product off the shelf. It's just not a behavior pattern that we take kindly to, but that's what we did. And it was a brutal financially for the business. We were actually seeing great growth, and obviously that put a total stop in it. And in fact, a similar bottled tea that was in the natural channel got the same kind of bad delivery and chose not to take their product off the shelf, and they got discontinued about 18 months later. So it was the right thing to do, but it was painful. And we talked to our bottle supplier. So he wasn't the manufacturer of the glass; he was our distributor supplier. And I said, boy, this. It was just, we ended up eating almost all the cost of it. So, lost several $100,000, put us in financial stress. It was a really challenging time. But what's interesting is, I'll skip to our next crisis in 2007, when the economy was starting, we went through the Great Recession. Everything got tough. It was tough to raise money. It was tough to pay, but to get to generate any kind of sales. We were a premium product. And so we chose not to go out and raise equity capital. And so we had to look at all other scenarios. And I'll share two outcomes that I think were how we got through that situation. The first was we got to the point, should we raise equity capital? And Gary was among actually the minority of board members who says, well, no, we've raised enough equity. The time really now is to go out and get debt. And so I talked to the banks, and they said, well, we can make you a loan, but you're going to need to personally guarantee everything. And so I felt, boy, that's tough, because the guarantees are far in excess of my net worth. I don't even know what it means to guarantee. How do you guarantee something that, once they take your house and all your savings, what else does that mean? And so at a board discussion, one of the board members said, well, I don't feel like we should ask Seth to, make that kind of sacrifice. He's already made a lot of sacrifices. And Gary said, well, look, this is going to make sure he's focused. And I felt like I was pretty focused, but in fact, it was the right thing to do. We took that line of credit and the loan, and we got more focused. But we also found cash from other places. And so I looked at, okay, I've got a line of credit. My goal is to not tap out the full line. Where else can I get money? Well, it turns out our largest supplier was our bottle supplier. And it turns out that I still, despite the, very serious challenges that we had with our bottle supplier, we still had a great relationship. And so I should say that one of the opportunities we took in 2003 as a result, there were two things that we did as a result of the crisis. The first was, we chose to stick with the distributor, because we felt like he wasn't the one who who made the bad glass. He shipped it to us, but it wasn't his manufacturing. But we also said we got to diversify the business. We cannot only be a glass bottle, because all we need is another situation like we had in 2003, and we're out of business. So we expanded our product line to also offer plastic bottles. But then in 2007, when we started to see financial stress, I had a long conversation with our bottle supplier, and I said, look, it's going to be tough, with the economy here. What I need to do is get extended terms. I know, we've been paying you normally on 30 days, but I need to go to 60 days for a month, and then I need to be on 90 days for 2 months after that. And partially because we had, I'd said, stuck with each other through the really tough times, he stepped up and, in a sense, financed our business. Because if we could take our largest supplier and get him to be a partner like that, he stuck with us for the long haul. It was a great example of, a crisis gives you the chance to really prove what kind of character you are, what kind of person you are, and how you treat people. Because it's easy to treat people when easy to treat people nicely when business is good, but you learn a lot about people when things are stressful. And so, in fact, that supplier and I stayed close all the way through. He sadly just died a few weeks ago. So, but really somebody who was critical to the business all the way throughout. And then ironically, when we started to grow beyond the natural channel, and around that time, 2007, 2008, one of the things that appealed to Coca-Cola was the fact that we had demonstrated ability to sell in plastic bottles as well. Because it also meant our product could cut over into more mainstream channels, like the convenience channel, like the food service channel. And so that crisis of where we still do sell our product in glass, but that crisis of having to diversify our packaging led to other opportunities for us. So as I said, we ended up selling to Coca-Cola, and in 2011, Coke bought the rest of the business, and I stayed involved with the business, but I also felt like I was ready to get back into the entrepreneurial trenches. And so I was trying to think about what the next big challenge and big opportunity could be. And my wife actually came across the ideas around Beyond Meat. She read an article about this company that was getting started out in California that was just about to enter retail, and had developed a way to replicate the taste and texture of animal-based meat using only plants. And this idea really spoke to us because our family had been vegetarian. Now we've been vegetarian for 14 years. And we were always happy with the decision from an ethical perspective, but frequently disappointed with the decision from a culinary perspective, because we just didn't like the taste of veggie burgers. I've joked before that veggie burgers are a conspiracy discourage people from becoming vegetarian because you taste it once, you say, I just don't need to eat something like that. But we heard, and when we tasted Beyond Meat, we recognized there was something here. And so I ended up sending an email to info@beyondmeat.com and said, I read this article about the vision of what you're trying to achieve. And the founder, Ethan Brown, reached out and said, let's talk. We could use some help, just like I needed Gary's advice back in the day. And so I got involved as an investor and then board member and then executive chair of the board of Beyond Meat, and have had so much fun helping to build that business. I'm now just the chairman of the board, but so excited to see that business grow and expand and evolve. And then, so last year I went through a bunch of transitions. Right at the end of the year, I finished my time with Coca-Cola, and I stepped away from being the executive chair of Beyond Meat to become the chair. And the reason for that was to, once again, well, two things. One, Beyond Meat had really professionalized the team to the point where, while I was needed and appreciated, I'm confident the team had the firepower to build a business, and I could be more of an advisor. And so I was ready for the next challenge. And so I had been involved from afar in my wife and son, who were helping to launch a restaurant business. And so you could say, well, boy, that seems like a bad turn to take if you're in the restaurant business, especially now when we think about where food service is. But what happened was I had gone to a panel on food and sustainability, and I sat next to a chef named Spike Mendelsohn. And there's a key lesson here for almost all of the businesses I've been involved with, which whenever I'm at that kind of panel and I'm with a chef who's a potential customer, I had a cooler bag of Beyond Burgers and, of course, Honest Tea that I gave the chef. And Spike loved the burgers, and I didn't know at the time, but his wife is vegan. So he was highly incentivized to find a way to be involved with what Beyond Meat was doing. And he actually became a celebrity chef he had been on Top Chef, and so he became one of our ambassadors at Beyond Meat. And then he reached out to me and said, boy, I love this Beyond Burger. Can we think about launching a restaurant? And I said, gosh, I can't do it now. I'm involved with Beyond Meat and with Coca-Cola, which, would mean a conflict of interest times two. But I'm happy to introduce you to my son, who's got a lot of passion for this, and my wife, and they got the thing up and running. But what happened when I went to lunch with Spike, and we walked around and we started looking at restaurants in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a wonderful sort of ecosystem of restaurants, but it's so brutal. They'd all turn over. And I thought to myself, boy, the last thing I would want to do, I said, I love this idea, Spike, but I can't see signing a lease and doing a build out. I mean, it costs millions of dollars for each of those. And I don't know if this is going to work. Let's reach out to Whole Foods and talk to them about this Friends program they have where they let restaurants, co-locate inside the store. And so we started with one store in Silver Spring, and then I just announced joining the team as a co-founder earlier this year. And just this week, we're launching a new store, or this month, in DC. And I was saying to Gary, it may be the only new restaurant opening in the world happening, but the model, of course, not just because it's plant-based, but because it's nestled inside a store, takes away some of the key risks. So one of the risks is the lease, but also the build out. And then location, how do you know you've got a successful location? And of course, with Whole Foods, we know we've got an audience built in. And I'll just talk quickly about two other things I'm doing, then I'll try to come to some observations. The other thing is that as part of getting the restaurant up and running, my oldest son, Jonah, came up with the phrase, eat the change you wish to see in the world. And of course, it's based, actually, it turns out Gandhi didn't actually say, be the change you wish to see in the world, but he's given credit for having said that. And so we'll give that to him. I thought eat the change is a really powerful idea. This idea of connecting people's diets to what their hopes are for the future, and particularly around climate, because our diets are the single biggest impact we can have on the climate. And so I realized Eat the Change is powerful, and actually worked with the team to register eatthechange.org and eatthechange.com. And eatthechange.org, we've actually launched, and you can go to that website, we've launched a grants program. My wife and I guess my family and I are giving out $1 million over the next 3 years to nonprofits focused on helping consumers make the connection between their diets and climate change. So we want to raise awareness around the importance of plant-based diets, diets, organic food, biodiversity, minimal packaging, and reduced food waste. And when we can help advance those causes, we believe that'll help address climate change. And then in addition to that, eatthechange.com is currently a holding site for what will be, a for-profit company, once again, focused on offering foods that help consumers eat the change, eat foods that are planet friendly while nourishing themselves as well. And so for me, this is a moment of crisis clearly in our economy, but it's also in our world. And so here's just a few observations about what I think will count as we look ahead. Number one, facts matter. I think I won't get into politics, but I think it's safe to say that there's a portion of at least in the United States, that likes to say things, take actions, and make decisions that aren't based on facts. And I hope that this virus and this pandemic is humbling for people who deny facts, because the consequences are literally deadly. And certainly true with our health, but it's also true with our climate. And it's also true with our diet. And so we are going to make at Eat the Change, we really want to make sure we can emphasize the importance of facts and help consumers understand and learn those facts and apply them. The other thing I want to say is that growth, what we're seeing with what happened with the pandemic is the way trends can happen in food as well. We saw, Gary and I, we know we've been toiling in the organic fields for decades, and it's been a build, but it's been a slow build. But I've seen what can happen, and what we saw with Beyond Meat, the growth can be exponential, just in this, and maybe it's a bad parallel, but like a virus, where people really catch fire and talk about it and spread it. And so I hope that this moment helps lead to exponential growth in key variables about not just our food, but the way we think about our environment. I think the other thing that I take away from this moment is how interconnected everything is. And so there's no question, we used to say, well, what I do here has an impact elsewhere. People, I think, maybe have denied that. You can't deny it now. And so I hope this leads to more mindfulness about our diet, about its global implications. And then in terms of, obviously, when we think about business opportunities, it won't surprise anyone to hear me say I believe in plant-based. Just this year, our family's made the crossover from being vegetarian to vegan. So far, it's gone well, and it just felt like the right next step if we're serious about eating the change. That's something we wanted to do. And I will say there's still opportunities in this space. I feel like I'm happy with what Beyond Meat, I'm delighted with what Beyond Meat is doing, but I will still say I think there's continued opportunity in dairy, certainly in cheese, certainly in egg substitutes. These are, people, one of the things I've learned is it's the right idea to address convenience. We can't ask, it's harder. You can ask people to totally change their dietary habits and their culinary patterns, but it's much easier when they can eat things they're used to, eat things they enjoy in the same manner, largely because a lot of the families are, rarely is a family entirely vegan. It may be mixed. And so if it's barbecue night or burger night, it's great when everybody can have a burger they can enjoy, and the people preparing it don't feel like they have to take different steps, but also because people I'd say they're willing to make the sacrifices in limited ways. And it's easier when they don't have to sacrifice taste and they don't have to sacrifice convenience, and they can make a switch. So those are some opening thoughts, but I'm excited to be with this group. Happy to open up the conversation, and I'll turn it over to Ethan, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. And I think I can speak for everyone and just say we all appreciate the optimism. I think opening a restaurant right now is like the epitome of optimism. So
Right.
Positivity. But I think the kind of obvious first question for everybody here is where, related to the pandemic, what are you seeing, and what are you expecting? And obviously understanding that no one has a crystal ball, but I think that's just sort of like a good place to kind of kick things off for people who have good insights.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing we all have to accept is whatever business plan you had for the beginning at the beginning of this year has to be thrown out. I mean, there is not going to be a return to normal. There'll be a return to something else, but whatever normal was or whatever was is not what's going to be. So, one of the biggest changes is food service, right? I mean, I look at it now. We look at here you got millions of people working from home. You've got all these restaurants shuttered, and yes, I do believe there will be offices. I do believe there will be restaurants, but it's going to be a fraction of where we are because people who are paying these rents are going to say, "Why do I need to pay those rents?" And look at all the retailers have shuttered. So food service as we've known it is not the way it will be. I think there will be dramatically fewer brick and mortar restaurants. I think ghost kitchens and other delivery services are going to be critical. And the restaurants that do stay open are going to have to find a way to create something really special and really something that can't be made at home. I mean, if I can make a burger at home, then the burger at the restaurant's got to be a lot better. The other thing that's interesting, I mean, one of the positive outcomes here is everyone's cooking at home a lot more than they used to, partially out of economic necessity. That's a good thing. But it also means any restaurants that wants to stay in business has to step up their game. They're going to have to offer something that someone can't make at home nearly as well.
Yeah, and I think behaviorally, we're seeing an acceleration of some trends that we were already seeing, just in terms of what you're talking about. And we already talked with someone else about just simple things like home workouts or meal delivery kits or whatever. But I think for the people on this call, are you noticing anything, or either anecdotally or data driven, around food trends? Like you mentioned organic and this being an interesting time for that. Are you seeing any evidence of any of that?
One of the big things we saw as we sort of think about Beyond Meat toward the end of last year is just acceleration beyond the vegan consumer. And so one of the biggest steps, innovate. So Beyond Meat made great innovations around the texture and taste of the product, but almost as important were working with the retailers to get the product carried in the meat section of the store. And so, you think about 2 years ago, a meat section was all dead animal meat, right? That's what it was. I'm not trying to be crass, but today, at least an eighth of most meat sections is plant-based meat. And the reason that's notable is because you're getting far more flexitarians eating this product now. And so I think this flexitarianism, that more expansive view of where I get my nutrients from is only going to continue. And so I think it already happened in milk and dairy, but I think it's going to continue across all the categories. And the data I saw at the end of the year that was most striking was I looked at Whole Foods, what share of their dairy aisle is plant-based. So nationally, about 13% of the dairy aisle is plant-based, but in Whole Foods, in one wave of data, I saw over 51% was plant-based. And I was just really struck by that. And as we, to the extent Whole Foods is a harbinger of the future, which I certainly hope it is, I think that's just going to continue.
And to your point, it's where the growth is.
Right.
I mean, that's your point. It's the growth.
This isn't my space, but it feels like we're seeing an inflection point, sort of a similar one in snacks right now, and in plant-based snacks, sort of breaking out of like gluten-free sets and now making their way into just being snacks. I think.
And one thing, here's just to go back to another opportunity. So I know gluten-free is a real trend. I know vegan is a real trend. I would discourage the combining of those two, because I have not tasted. There are very few products that are gluten-free and vegan that really taste great, and taste is still king. And when we put out products that don't satisfy on taste, we set back our whole movement. So
okay, there's 260 people on this call. Somebody's going to rise to that challenge. I know.
Some are going to be upset I said that, but I do feel, we just got to make sure taste counts.
Definitely. So for the 260 people on here, I think probably one of the ones that made everyone's ears perk up was your reference to 2007 and that sort of experience about not raising equity capital, but then going out for debt. I think this is a position that a lot of people are in right now, a very similar one. And just in the entrepreneurs I've talked to, this is a point of tension for everybody right now in figuring out what to do. Do you have any kind of feedback based on your own experience in that time?
I do, and I'll go back even further to 2000. So the way our 2001. So our business, iced tea, it was seasonal. So we sell a lot in the summer, and then the pattern we were in is we'd have a great summer, and then we get to the fall, and we really raise the capital because look how much we've grown. In 2001, we got great August, great July, great August. We get to September, I'm literally have a call scheduled with a major investor on 9/11, and everything shut down, all financing shut down. And I just realized that this was not the time to raise capital. And so I would encourage everyone who's, in the middle of or pondering a capital raise, you just got to push it back. You have to, so that's where you go to your suppliers. And here's what I'll say. Look, when I reached out to my bottle supplier and had that conversation, and here at Plant Burger, we reached out to all of our suppliers and said, look, we're opening a restaurant in the middle of this crisis. It's exciting, but we're going to need your support because, and meanwhile, keep in mind what these guys are seeing. They're seeing tons of restaurants close up. So here is not just a restaurant that's growing, but it's actually opening a new outlet. Yeah. It's totally fine to say we're going to need extended terms. We're going to need your support on a new store opening. So there is financing available, but it's not going to be from the traditional folks. So talk to the longer, well-established suppliers about how can you help us. And then on the other side, distributors, if they can pay early and stretch the cash that way too for a discount, that can be worth doing. So I guess my advice is, you've got to push back the capital raise. It's not the right time. And if you insist on doing it, you're either going to get crushed on valuation, or you're going to, just get terms that just aren't right.
Not favorable.
Can I I have to wedge in here a little commercial. May 8th, the second day of our Entrepreneurship Institute, a lot who've been on these calls know it's a pitch day. And actually, we're up to 36 investors now who are showing up. Now, your point on valuation, Seth, is something we'll see what happens. But I will tell you that people with capital are looking for places to put it. And they're looking at this space and everything we're talking about. And even more precisely, we have this year the highest percentage of low dollar investors that I've had. People who are looking at small companies. There's a couple of new funds that have kicked up just the last couple of weeks. Part of it is philanthropy. People just want to help. Part of it is opportunity. So let's see for the 8th. I by the way, I'm not disputing the core point.
No, but here's what I'll also say. I would never not speak to investors, right? So there's a difference between speaking to investors and raising capital. You always want investors to follow your story, and frankly, you want investors to see how you behave during a crisis. You don't only want to speak to investors during when there's good growth. So
yes,
I would encourage people to participate in the pitch.
Yeah, and this, to be frank, the pitch is partly for you to try out a pitch in a safe place, right? And you can't practice enough, and it's also partly for, if you're not one of the however many we have that day, 16 pitches, it's a chance for hundreds of others to watch the pitch and the response. So I concur with you there.
The other thing I might do, let's say I was hoping to raise $2 million. If I in the middle of it, or I've got some commitments, just cut it off at 1 million and take what you can. But
agree with that. Sorry, back to you.
All good. I just want to touch on, tie this together with some people who have been on all the calls. We're hearing a sort of common thread around working with suppliers right now. And we actually work with the same bottle supplier that you're referencing. So, and had a similar kind of experience just in terms of support. But can you just reiterate the importance of that right now for people who are feeling the strain of cash?
Yeah. I mean, that's where your biggest supplier doesn't want you to go out of business because they you're it's money that they'll lose too. So you actually have more leverage than you think. That said, I always do these with humility. I never try to go in and be arrogant and say, give me this or I'm walking. It's that threats is the wrong way to go, but make them partners in the business. Make them sort of understand what your big picture vision. I mean, that's the best part of what we did at Plant Burger when we talked to our vendors just last week was it wasn't just, hey, we need your help. It's here's where we're going. Here's how we're growing. Here's why we're different. And by the way, we're opening a new store. And these guys, so you're talking to, in general, if you're not talking to the CEO, you're talking to someone who's involved in the food service, at least for us, it was the food service channel. They've seen nothing in terms of growth. Not only growth, I mean, the things have basically collapsed. So you got to appreciate their point of view and just think about how they see it as well.
Yeah, I think it's an important shift in mentality right now to understand that it doesn't have to be so adversarial.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move to. There's a lot of questions coming in, so I'll try to kind of filter them. So Trevor asked, this one's a lot of Beyond Meat specific questions. Yep. I want to hear about honesty too. But so Trevor asked, can we hear a bit more about Beyond Meat and your organic background and how those values come into play in supporting the brand? It's been challenging as an organic consumer to understand how Beyond fits into an organic lifestyle. And is there a future for organics in this category?
Absolutely there is, but it's a long-term fit, right? So, the supply chain, our core ingredient is peas, at least right now at Beyond Meat. And of course, we have the ability to work with other ingredients, but peas were the first scaled ingredient. But it's still an immature supply chain. I mean, if you think about our inputs for Beyond Meat, it's dramatically less than what is involved in making animal meat. I mean, we use 99% less water, 93% less land. So just dramatic contrast. But at the same time, our business isn't scaled. The meat industry and the cow have had, centuries or millennia to evolve. And we're just in our really first about 4 or 5 years. So we're confident we will get to that place. So then I think, so we will get to that supply chain, but it's not yet evolved. There aren't enough organic peas for us to be able to source and convert to. But even once you get past the peas, you got to worry about the other inputs, whether it's coconut oil, canola oil, and some of the flavorings. So I'm confident over time there will be organic varieties. But the other piece is we're growing so quickly right now. We have to make sure we have a commitment to democratizing our products. So we want to make it as available as possible. And to go organic so early would raise the price and make it economically exclusive and prohibitive. So our choice, which I think was the right choice, is we've got to gain scale. We are confident we're going to be able to lower the price dramatically over time because of the very reason I said, so much fewer inputs. It just takes time to get there. So then I think about, well, from an environmental perspective, while organics is critical, and any company that I'm building, at least from scratch, is always going to have or be committed to organic. You can think about the environmental difference between, you could have an organic piece of beef versus a non-organic Beyond Burger, and there's just no difference. There's not even, you can't even put them on the same graph in terms of the environmental impact. So I'm confident organic is where we'll get to with Beyond Meat, at least as an option. But I'm comfortable as a family that certainly been committed to organic for decades. I'm very comfortable having a non-organic Beyond Burger.
Yeah, there's a different order of operations depending on what segment and what category you're in and what's available. Obviously,
that's right.
Yeah. And you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face too.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
All right. Ronald asked, will you, so this is the last thing you spoke about with your climate initiatives. Will you advance climate change for for-profit companies as well?
So in the sense that I can be a colleague, and as we're doing now, and an occasional investor, but I think for Eat the Change, the for-profit piece will be the brand that we'll build. And so I would say we're all part of a movement. We'll try to grow together, but I don't have, for example, I'm not setting up investment fund to go invest in others. I'm very happy to be associated with other groups like S2G. I'm an advisor there, and work with the folks at Power Plant Ventures, which do that for a living. But I won't, and of course, I'll continue my service on the board of Beyond Meat, but I won't have a role beyond an additional role there.
Sure. All right, we're kind of jumping around all over the place, so I'm throwing some curveballs at you.
Yeah.
This is going back to the early Honest Tea days and that part of your story. And I have an additional question about that. But Paloma asked, Seth, did you have a suppliers lined up in advance of your first Whole Foods order? What risk did you have to take in order to be ready for that initial order coming through?
We did not. It's so funny. We sold it out of thermoses and mail. We were just ordering stuff online, and it's classic. So like we had this chai recipe that the Whole Foods buyer loved, and we sold it. And then I called the guy, said, I'm going to need 400 pounds. And he's like, oh, I can only make 20 pounds at a time, and I grind it in my backyard. I'm like, oh, don't tell me that. so I ended up doing just an internet search of spice companies. Unfortunately, we're not far from Baltimore. I drove up to this wonderful place called Van Spices, and this woman, Ann Wilder, and I just picked out all the different, cardamom and cloves and cinnamon and ginger, and kept mixing them up till we came up with our own spice recipe. And we found them. But the key was we had gotten Whole Foods. Once you have Whole Foods commitment, or any, a key buyer's commitment, it made it much more real to everybody. So it wasn't just, in reality, it was just some guy in Bethesda coming up and saying, hey, I want to go buy some spices from you. But I could say I've got a purchase order that I'm able to, I'll be making an order based off of. So that just made it seem much more real. And I, that said, I still didn't get my calls returned by a lot of the folks I reached out to, and just keeping after it is, like, of course, part of the job description.
Yeah, I'll just add that I've had the exact same experience, and again, it depends on what your product is, and ensuring that it's available and exists if you're going to be promising an organic product. And if you have some specifics around your supplier, your supply chain, that's important too. But you can definitely kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah,
and that's what we've done. So, I just lost a question. 1 second. I had a great question. I love this one. Man, you guys are keeping them coming. So Joanna asked, with Honest Tea, you competed with large, deep pocket brands.
Yeah.
What are the best things you did to capture some of their market share?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, that's really important because it highlights one of the challenges brands are going to have going forward. So we knew what we were selling tasted different. And this is the same with Beyond Meat. You can talk about a taste, but there's no substitute for people being able to taste it. So our main marketing tactic for those first few years was just sampling, just as I did with Spike Mendelsohn, and I got him a burger for him to take home and taste. I spent more time in those 17 Whole Foods stores than anywhere else during those early product launches. And so one of the challenges our movement's going to have to grapple with once we get out of this immediate pandemic is what happens to sampling, right? Because I don't think consumers or stores are going to be all that excited about people giving out samples the way they were.
Yeah, that's been a pretty common question coming through in some of the other ones, is like, what do we do now in place of sampling? And obviously this is a moving target because things could be different in 2 weeks or a month. But
can I just jump in and say, I'm having similar conversations with everyone from, lots of brands. There's, in the same way that we're learning to eat and meat differently, I think demoing and sampling and educating is an opportunity for the creative right now. One of Stonyfield's most successful things that we do is we bring bloggers, influencers onto farms.
Yeah.
And, this technology lets us do that. We have several farmers who are very savvy with social media.
Yeah.
Another is we do meals together. Well, we can send out a group of meals, tell people, and just line up. I mean, how many people had Easter dinner or Passover Seder online this year, right?
Yeah.
And I do need to say, I just was texting with somebody here on today's webinar that, one of the things I want to do, normally when we have the Entrepreneurship Institute in person, it's really easy for everyone to taste. You just walk around and hand the product out, right?
Yeah.
But now we're trying, and I'll say this at the end, but I'll just briefly say it now. We are trying to get all of our cases in and selected this week, so we have time for people to get their samples out to folks. I don't think we should rule out the possibility of sampling. There's lots of ways people can download and get samples at home. We just need a little bit more lead time and a lot more creativity.
Yeah, more creativity, but I do think it's going to be more expensive. I mean, and of course it changed, but back in the day, I used to just be able to drive up in my Saturn station wagon and bring in some bottles of tea and pour
Yeah,
out
although
samples.
you have to admit that in retail, it's become, demos
Yeah.
are not the same cost that it was
No,
when
I
you
know.
and I started. I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays you have the captive demo agency. That's really expensive. You
Yeah.
have to actually, sell them the product and then sample it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. This could shake out.
Yeah, but it is a challenge because as emerging brands, taste is, as I've said, is critical, and we've got to get people to taste it. And so it is, I think I agree with you, Gary. So influencers and social media will become even more important as a vehicle for trial.
Yeah, and I think this is emerging as an important topic, so we can kind of wrap it up and hopefully address a handful of the questions on here. But there are some things.
So one last thing, Ethan, I just want to say is when you can get a restaurant to be your partner in branding, that's critical. So one of the things that's really helped Beyond Meat is when we launched, whether it's Dunkin' Donuts or Carl's Jr., when they put us on the menu, they did it with a branded, it was the Beyond Breakfast Sausage Patty. And so that's the kind of brand building that is valuable. And I would encourage brands, if to the extent you can make that happen, that's a game changer.
Yeah, and that's a creative one. I mean, we don't really have full results yet, and I'm happy to share with anyone offline. But what we're doing is we're offering free samples through the website, and we've worked out the cost so that the actual customer acquisition cost is manageable. If you convert a certain percent. But there are some creative things that you can do right now. There was a question about if you guys have or if your experience at Honest Tea, if you guys did anything specific labeling wise to drive trial, which I thought was an interesting one.
Not to drive trial. I mean, we did some promotions, with particular causes over time. Yeah. But not specifically to drive trial.
Yeah.
We are, I will say Stonyfield, as Seth and Ethan are well aware, our lids were a very powerful trial builder, both in terms of doing contests, sweepstakes, but also in terms of, like you say, causes that we would, we would promote a relationship with the Conservation Law Foundation or Al Gore's organization, or promote an inconvenient truth. And if you sent in the lid, you'd get something from us, and we would give the name to the nonprofits. So that was pretty effective.
So I have another one to shift gears a little bit. And I think I know some of the answers to this one, but Maybelline asked, interested to know, Seth, what is your routine like to maintain a level head, optimism, and amazing thought leadership over the years?
So thank you for asking that, because it brings me back to, one of my opening comments, which is, for me, my family is my foundation. So I still really make sure to stay connected to them. We're so lucky now to have them all in the house with us, which may sound odd, 3 boys out of college, but we love it. And we do all the sports together and just really spend a lot of time together. But also for that, exercise is a key. I don't want to say it's a discipline. It's a dependency I have. I just have to make sure I'm exercising every day to clear my mind, to be connected to nature. And I think one of the themes I really want to emphasize, I know I've heard Gary say this, but this is for this audience, your single biggest, people ask you, what's your single biggest asset as a company, or your single most important resource? They might say your time, but I actually think it's your energy. And so because you can work crazy hours, but you've got to bring the right energy to it. So how do you create that energy? And I've done the trade-off. If I have a choice between 1 more hour of sleep or an hour of exercise, I'll always take the exercise because I get to sleep better, and then it pays off. So for me, exercise is critical, and being in nature is critical as well. And if I can combine those at the same time, that's even more efficient.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are struggling to figure out how that looks right now.
Yeah. So for me, look, I'll always, I ran in college, so I still do a lot of running, but I'm also just happy to go hiking with my wife along the Potomac, or to go out with my sons. We have a very competitive 2-on-2 volleyball game where I'm sad to report I have no, my teams are, I have the more losing record, but I just love diving around in the sand and just shouting and being competitive and getting out all the aggressions.
Do we have some time to keep going with a few
We
of
do.
these?
We do.
How are you holding up over
I'm
there,
great.
Seth?
Yeah, no, love it.
Cool.
We got about 11 minutes, Ethan.
All right. So I thought this was an interesting one and definitely something different. Brian asked, for individuals looking to get involved in startup companies, would you recommend starting as a mentor and evolving into an investor or advisor role with equity financial objectives? And that's, I guess it depends on sort of what you bring to the table, but I guess just to broaden that, maybe what your level of interaction and what you found most productive with early stage companies.
Well, it's interesting because with Beyond Meat, you could say technically that's what happened. I reached out and got involved. I think the key is it's hard to, entrepreneurs are already strapped. So you just call up and say, hey, I want to get involved. It's like, well, what does that mean? Versus if you can reach out to them and be helpful. And so, of course, you can say, well, if you're an experienced entrepreneur, you may be able to have some particular advice. But even as a aspiring business person, you could do your own shelf. Hey, I looked at your shelf set in the store, and it turns out that you're not in the right place in the store, or I watched this. I sat at your restaurant, and I noticed when people go to your menu, they're ordering. They always ask the question about this. So provide some insights, provide some observations, demonstrate not just that you're looking for a job or you can be useful. And there are very few entrepreneurs who will turn away, free help.
Free.
That's the key. So I think demonstrate that you can be valuable, and then that makes a difference.
Yeah, that's good advice. All right, let's do a couple more, maybe two more. This is William asked, how are you able to navigate with Whole Foods right now, keeping the restaurant opening on track?
Yeah, so what's fortunate is that the retail is deemed an essential service, and so while Whole Foods has shut down their prepared foods because of the exposure, a restaurant that where we are able to we did make changes to the way we operate. So it used to be at a open seating restaurant. Obviously, everything now is to go. Everything is contactless. It's all ordered by apps, and we used to have ketchup and other sauces dispensers. We got rid of all those. It's all prepackaged. So we are absolutely meeting the guidelines. Our employees wear masks and gloves. We actually are able. We have a very small footprint, but we're still able to practice social distancing because it's a very lean and efficient operation. The menu is very simple by design. We aren't, it's a burger restaurant, so. We sell burgers and fries, and so it's simple, and that helps. And what we've seen is that here's one little interesting nuance. So we do work with Uber Eats and others. The way that a lot of the apps work is they'll feature the newest restaurant at the top of the app. Well, there aren't any new restaurants, so we've got a lot of visibility. And a lot, like the new store in DC, when we opened, we hadn't even announced it opening, and we got over $1,000 in orders just because people found it. So it was, so there are some opportunities there.
Great. I'll give you an opportunity to plug. Vicky asked what your favorite business book is.
Well,
and then one other personal one, Fernando wanted to know, how is your son?
Oh, thank you.
You mentioned that. You mentioned Ellie.
Yeah. So well, I am obligated to say that in 2013, Barry and I published a book called Mission in a Bottle, which is a comic book story telling of honesty. And it is, we made a comic book by design to make it more accessible, to help bring the story to life and help overcome, I'd say, sort of a repetitive pattern a lot of business books have. So that's been fun. I will say I also, I've been reading a lot of different business books recently, but a few others. Just I really enjoyed Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's book, founder of Nike. I also finished a book recently called Moonshots, which is about how to make leaps in thinking, and this is particularly applied to Beyond Meat, how to innovate and create disruptive change and still run a business. Because a lot of times a business starts with a big idea and then it just lapses into commercial transactions. And then thank you for asking about my son. So yeah, Ellie, our son, is thriving. He is teaching here in DC. Our oldest son, Jonah, is helping to run the restaurant. And then our youngest son has just started with a plant-based ice cream company. And he's loving that too. So my wife and I say that all of our sons went into the family business because while they're not working directly for Honest Tea or Beyond Meat, they are working in social change and impact.
Seth and Ethan, thank you so much, and what a rich afternoon. Let me just say a couple of very quick things in closing here. First, I mentioned this earlier, and Carlene just posted it in the chat. Please, if you have a case, if you're wondering what to do about finance right now, should I get debt? Should I take equity? Should I do venture capital? Should I get my suppliers? Should I do angels? How do I do it? How am I positioned? Submit a case for the Thursday morning of the HEI. Don't forget, it's only $50 for 2 days at the Hirshberg Entrepreneurship Institute. And that's, again, it's a nonprofit. Nobody's making money from that. If you have something on positioning, branding, using your packaging to build trial, how do I demo in this post-COVID world? Submit a case for the positioning your brand panels that will run. Just take a look at hirshberginstitute.org and you'll see the incredible panelists who we've got together. So many folks, not that there's anyone like Seth, but a lot of people with a lot of experience here. If you have a pitch to raise capital, submit. But my real request is submit today or tomorrow. Go on the Hirshberg Institute site. It's really easy. It's just a paragraph or two. And the main reason I want you folks to do that is because we want time this year for people to be able to, we want to choose you next week so you can send your samples to the people you're going to be pitching to so they can get a chance to try them or eat them while you're up. So I hope you'll do that. Seth has been a stalwart at our institute. I can tell you it's if this has been valuable this afternoon. There's just 2 solid days of this, so I hope you'll be involved. As I mentioned, tomorrow 4:30 our webinar with John Raish and Bob Burke at UNFI. Do get on that ASAP. Get in early because it's, like I said, I think we're up to over 1,300 now. Shazi Visram will speak with us on Thursday. I met Shazi through you, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've both been investors and board members with her. And then you can see the remains of the schedule. And then we just added the Wednesday, the 29th one. I want to just try to quickly play back what I heard from you, Seth. And boy, there's a lot of lessons here. I heard compartmentalize. That's a way to, here's the Institute while I'm doing this. You gotta know how to compartmentalize. You gotta block, and boy, exercise really helps you to do that. Invest in your family. Keeps you healthy, keeps you strong. In Seth's case, it's his compass. It's the same with me. When faced with dire circumstances, take your losses and reset. Just go ahead and do it. Pull everything off the shelf, as Seth did. Or as Nicole did the other day, lop off 20% of your business, the cookie business, if that's what it takes to grow again. View your suppliers as partners. Absolutely. They are dependent on you. You are in an ecosystem. Take advantage. Seth's example, I have the same. They want your success as much as you do, so find a win together. You find out who you are and the characters of others in crises. Isn't that true? That's a really powerful one. Follow your passions. This is the Beyond Beyond Meat story. You'll never regret it. You follow your heart. I don't know anybody who says, gee, I wish I hadn't done that.
Beyond Broth too. Shout out.
Beyond Broth. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. keep your products handy and never miss an opportunity to get trial. You mentioned the chef, always. I always joke I could ship the yogurt 3,000 miles. It was the last 18 inches that made all the difference. You got to get it into people's mouths. Ignore your kids at your peril. I love the eat the change thing. And, I got a living example of someone I can't ignore right on this webinar here. I love Facts Matter. And may I say, I pray that enough Americans weigh the importance of facts come November, because this has been a fact-free zone. Seth's being shy about politics. I'll be very direct. This has been a tragedy of the first order. The ignorance of science, the ignorance of experts, the failure to ground ourselves in unassailable fact. And yes, facts matter for all of us. Viral works. We're being done in by, or botched around by virus right now, but virus is how we grow our businesses, and we are a viral movement, and changing how people eat and changing how people think. And we don't live in silos. Everything's interconnected. That's a viral concept, and we all need to be preachers in that church. That you can't just think of climate or toxins or animal health. You got to think about the whole damn thing. Address convenience, right? It's got to, taste is number one, but it's got to be easy for people to get it. No return to normal. Amen. Food service is going to have to be incredibly special as we come out of this. Something different. Sweet Grain, which Seth and I are both involved with, is a wonderful example of a company feeding lots and lots of healthcare workers all over America, and have pivoted to a completely online pre-order system, and they have not missed a beat. And this is going to have to be the way it is. Almost done here, Seth, but you got a lot of good lessons.
You got it.
Fish where the fish are. Sell the meat in the meat section.
Yeah.
Many of us, Seth is actually a baby compared to me, but many of us began our careers banished to what I call the natural products ghetto. Yeah. That place that nobody was shopping. Ethan struggles with it every day with his shots. He's, where do people buy shots? Well, the problem is there is no destination, and so he's having to be scrappy. But help your retail partner. They want to be successful too. Create sets, create places, but get where they're shopping for that stuff. Go to the toilet paper shelf, for God's sakes. Nobody's there right now. Finally, keep after it. I love that. Keeping after it is part of the job description. Boy, that is such a mouthful. Keeping after it with money, keeping after it with your customer, keeping after it with your distributor who's not picking up off the dock, keeping after it with your employees, keeping after it with yourself. Look in the mirror. What am I not doing? And I love, and I think this is such a beautiful close, the single biggest contribution to your enterprise is your energy. And that is just such a powerful mouthful. So I'm not sure if I missed any other key lessons, but what a wonderful bounty, and thank you. And to everyone who joined us this afternoon, thank you. If you have friends who would like to take advantage of Seth's wisdom, as Julie said, this will be recorded. And Ethan, thank you. Happy birthday. Oh, yeah, Ethan, go ahead.
Well, I was actually just going to add to that summary. I think there was an important takeaway that we didn't really get into about Seth's adding diversification of packaging and adding a plastic, which ended up being, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it ended up being a pretty important change in eventually being acquired. And I think that can be applied across a lot of different things, whether it's your functional offerings or your formats. I think we have definitely found diversity to be a huge asset at an early stage, because it allows you to sort of plug and play where applicable. And it's been huge for us right now. And so I think there's a lesson that we didn't really get into there, but I would also add that to the summary.
Yeah, and a corollary is don't be so sure of yourself, or just the way you launched isn't always the way you have to be.
Yeah.
Amen. Really, really thank you, Ethan, for that catch. Thank you again, Ethan. I love you. Happy birthday. And Carlene and Julie, thank you. And Seth, any final word from
No,
you?
what an honor. Thank you, Gary. I really enjoyed being with you guys.
Okay. Everybody, thank you. Stay safe. We'll see probably a hell of a lot of you tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Seth.
Bye.